The sun had barely risen when the news spread beyond the village. Mazi Dike was dead, and his horrifying secret had been exposed. But Adora knew this wasn't over. Dike hadn't walked alone. He had accomplices, men who supplied him with victims, men who ensured the silence of the village, men who profited from the sale of human flesh. They wouldn't let this go unpunished. And now, Adora was their number one enemy. That night, as the village mourned the lost souls buried in Dike's pit, Adora couldn't sleep. Something didn't feel right. She lay on her bed, her heart restless. Every sound outside made her tense. The rustling of leaves, the howl of an owl. Everything felt too loud, too close. Then she heard it, a faint knock on her door. Her breath caught. No one visited at this hour, not unless they meant harm. Slowly, she sat up. The dim moonlight cast eerie shadows across the mud walls. Another knock. "Adora," a voice whispered. It was low, rough, a voice she didn't recognize. Fear called around her chest, but she swallowed it down. She grabbed a small knife hidden under her mat and stepped cautiously towards the door. "Who is there?" she asked, her voice firm, despite the tremor in her hands. Silence. Then, the door burst open. A hand clamped over her mouth before she could scream. A strong, muzzled arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her off the ground. She kicked and struggled, but the man holding her was too powerful. "You made a mistake," the deep voice growled in her ear. Dike wasn't the only one. Terror flooded her veins. They had come for her. She barely caught a glimpse of the men, 3 of them, dressed in dark wrappers, their faces hidden in shadows. They moved like ghosts, dragging her into the night without a sound. The village was asleep. No one saw her being taken. They moved swiftly, disappearing into the forest that bordered the village. The further they went, the darker it became. She knew these men weren't taking her to be questioned. They were taking her to be silenced. Her heart pounded. She had to think fast. Just as they reached a clearing, Adora threw her head back, smashing her skull into the nose of the man holding her. He grunted in pain, loosening his grip. Adora twisted, kicked his knee, and broke free. She ran. The trees blurred around her as she sprinted through the thick forest, her bare feet scraping against stones and roots. She didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Behind her, the men cursed and shouted, chasing after her. Then she saw it, a small wooden hut hidden in the shadows of the trees. She didn't know who it belonged to, but right now she had no choice. She darted towards it, pushing through the creaky wooden door and slamming it shut behind her. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps as she pressed herself against the wall. Outside, the footsteps grew louder. "We know you are in there," one of the men called out. "Come out and we'll make it quick." Adora's hands clenched into fists. No, she wasn't going to die like this. She scanned the dark room. Her eyes landed on a rusty machete leaning against the wall. She gripped it tight. The door began to creak open. Adora raised the machete. The war has just begun. Adora held her breath, gripping the rusty machete tighter as the door creaked open. A shadow loomed in the doorway. "You have caused enough trouble, girl," the deep voice sneered. "Come out now, and maybe we won't make you suffer too much." Adora didn't wait. She swung the machete. The sharp blade sliced through the air, catching the man's arm. He let out a roar of pain, staggering back. She pushed forward, knocking him aside, and bolted into the forest, but she wasn't running away. She was running towards something, toward answers. She had overheard whispers before, talk of a secret location where Dike stored his meat before distributing it. The villagers assumed his trade was small, but what if it was much bigger than they thought? She needed proof, and she knew exactly where to find it. Dodging branches and roots, she raced through the darkness, her body screaming in pain, but she couldn't stop now. Minutes later, she reached the abandoned warehouse near the river, Dike's hidden slaughterhouse. The stench hit her first. Rot, blood, death, swallowing her fear. She pushed the heavy wooden door open. Inside, Adora saw horrors beyond her worst nightmares. Dozens of bodies, hacked apart, stored in crates, labeled as livestock. Blood-stained tables, rusted knives, and a fire pit still smoldering. But what made her stomach turn was the list. A long parchment pinned to the wall with names. Not just the names of victims, the names of buyers. Powerful men, chiefs, traders, even some from neighboring villages. Dike hadn't been working alone. His entire operation was a part of a larger, well-organized network of human flesh traders. The truth was bigger and more dangerous than she had imagined. Adora had little time to react before she heard them, the sound of boots crunching against the dirt floor. They had followed her. "You shouldn't have come here," a cold voice said. Adora turned slowly. A man stepped out of the shadows, not one of Dike's Turks, but someone far worse. Chief Nwosu, a respected elder in the village, a man everyone trusted. But here he was, standing in the middle of this horror, completely unbothered. "You really think we would let you expose us?" he said, smiling cruelly. Dike was only a small piece of the puzzle. Adora's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about one butcher. This was a system, and now she had uncovered its darkest secrets. Will Adora escape and expose the truth, or will she become the next name on the list? Adora's heart pounded as she stood frozen before Chief Nwosu. Dike was dead, but the true masterminds were alive, and they weren't about to let her leave. "You should have stayed quiet," Chief Nwosu said, stepping closer. "Now you leave us no choice." Behind him, more men emerged from the shadows, influential elders, wealthy traders, and even warriors want to protect the village. Adora realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't just a business, it was a brotherhood of blood. But she wouldn't die here. Not like this. She took a slow step back, her fingers tightening around the machete. "Do you know the difference between you and me, Chief?" she asked, forcing her voice to stay steady. Chief Nwosu chuckled. "Enlighten me," Adora smiled. "I came prepared." Before he could react, she slammed her foot into an oil lantern resting on a wooden crate. The glass shattered, and fire erupted. The flames spread fast, licking at the dry wood of the warehouse. The men shouted in alarm, scrambling back. Adora took her chance. She ran, dodging crates. She sprinted toward the exit, her lungs burning from the thick smoke. A hand grabbed her arm, one of Nwosu's men. She twisted, drove her knee into his stomach, and swung the machete at his shoulder. He screamed. She didn't look back. The night air hit her like a slap as she burst out of the burning warehouse. Behind her, the fire raged, consuming the horrors inside. But she wasn't safe yet. Footsteps thundered after her. They were coming. Adora ran like never before. Through the thick forest, through the thick trees, across the riverbank, her feet barely touching the ground. She could see the village lights in the distance, if she could just make it. A hand grabbed her ankle. She crashed to the ground. pain jolting through her body, a man loomed over her, blade raised. "Time's up," he hissed. Adora didn't think. She snatched a rock, slammed it into his skull and kicked him off. He crumbled, unconscious. She got up and ran. The village square was crowded when Adora stumbled in, bloodied, bruised, but alive. She fell to her knees, gasping as people rushed to her side. "What happened?" someone cried. "She's hurt," another voice called. Adora raised her head. "It was never just Dike," she rasped. "The real killers are among us." Gasps rippled through the crowd as she pointed a shaking finger at Chief Nwosu, stepping out of the shadows. His robes were singed. His face, usually calm, was twisted with rage. "Don't listen to her," he thundered. "She's lying." But then, a massive explosion shook the ground. Everyone turned. The way house had collapsed in flames, and with it, the buried truth. The villagers murmured in horror as the realization dawned. Adora had proof. She told them everything: the names, the death walk, the list of victims. The people listened. Then they turned on Nwosu. By morning, the village elders gathered. The truth was undeniable. Nwosu and his men were arrested, their empire of blood destroyed. Justice had come, but Adora knew this was only the beginning. Because as the sun rose over the village, she realized some monsters hide in the shadows, others stand in the lights, wearing the faces of trusted men, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure they never ruled again. The village had finally found peace, or so Adora thought. Chief Nwosu and his men had been arrested. The slaughterhouse burned to the ground, taking its horrors with it. But Adora couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Too many things still didn't add up. The first sign came 2 weeks later. 2 men who had testified against Nwosu disappeared without a trace. Their families searched, but it was as if they had been wiped from existence. Then a message arrived at Adora's doorstep. A single blood-stained feather. Her stomach twisted. It was a warning. The brotherhood wasn't dead. One night, Adora overheard a secret conversation between 2 elders at the village square. "The fool fell too easily," one muttered. "That's why he was never meant to lead," the other whispered. Her blood ran cold. They weren't talking about Nwosu. They were talking about who would replace him. Someone else was stepping into power. Someone even more dangerous. Adora knew she had to act fast. She traveled to a distant village where an elder named Okechukwu lived. He had once been part of Nwosu's circle, but had left years ago. When she arrived, his home was abandoned, but there was a message carved into the wooden walls: "The serpent never dies. It only shed its skin." And beneath it, a name she thought she'd never hear again: Dike. Adora's heart pounded. Dike had a brother, and he was coming for revenge. Will Adora survive the war that's about to begin, or has she only awakened a greater evil? Watch this suspenseful story and find out. The real terror had just begun. The village thought it was safe, but evil never dies so easily. Adora couldn't ignore the signs: the missing men, the whispers of a new leader, the chilling message carved into Okechukwu's walls. And then came the final proof. A severed hand was left on her doorstep. She recognized the bracelets wrapped around the wrists. It belonged to Chijioke, the guard who had helped her expose Nwosu. Her stomach twisted. He was dead. And this was only the beginning. Dike had a brother. Adora never knew much about him, only that he had left the village years ago, vanishing like a ghost. Now he had returned, and he wasn't just picking up where Dike left off. He was building something even bigger. The ritual killings weren't over. They had only evolved. One night, Adora heard a noise outside her hut. She grabbed her machete and stepped into the darkness. The village was silent, too silent. Then a voice whispered from the trees, "You should have stayed quiet, Adora." She spun around, but no one was there. Her pulse pounded. She was being watched. She tried to warn the elders, but they dismissed her. "Let the past stay buried," one of them said. Buried, like the body still hidden in the earth. The people wanted to believe that the danger had passed, that Mosu's arrest had ended the nightmare. They didn't want to see the truth. The real mastermind was still out there, and he was already moving his pieces. Then came the final blow. A child went missing. A young girl named Ezine, only 10 years old. Adora knew what it meant. The Brotherhood was sending a message. This wasn't just about power anymore. This was personal. Adora had two choices. She could run, flee the village before they came for her next, or she could fight, face an enemy even more ruthless than before. She knew one thing: if she didn't stop them now, more innocent people would die, and this time, no one would be safe. Will Adora uncover the truth before it's too late? Or will she be the next body left in the shadows? Stay tuned to find out. The hunt has begun. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you have learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one. See you on the next one. Thank you and God bless. Bye.